So we were talking about this highlighter slash atlas thing, right? Is it
Yes.
does it have Zapworthy, atlas, highlighter? Some of
It's all of them.
same it's all the same
Yes,
thing, or they're different
it's
pieces
it's
of.
all it's all the same thing. So yeah, I'm still not sure what to do naming wise. Like I'm obviously highlighter is perfect, and what I'm wondering is if the because highlighter is for highlights, right? As its name implies. And what I'm thinking, because what I want to build, I was taking notes a few days ago when I was designing, like,
Yeah.
what is it? What am I building? What is this thing? And the value prop that I've arrived to is it's a client that you use to interact with any information that you find valuable. So whereas Damus or Amethyst or like all the typical clients are for the real time
Yeah.
information. What I want for this client, whatever it's called, is to keep or to interface with the important information. So as you go, like we create so much data footprint, right? Like as we go through life, we create so much data. Most of it is, the value of the data diminishes over its lifetime. Very sure, like most of it is only valuable at this moment.
Right.
And in 10 days or 1 year or 10 years, it's not valuable anymore. But some data is. And what I've maybe you have like I'm super curious to hear more about your background with this. I mean, the fact that you have highlighter.com clearly means that you've been thinking about this for a while.
Yeah.
But I mean, like most, I guess like most type A people, we try to find systems to make sense of this amount of data.
Yeah.
And you see so many different companies trying to solve this problem to this
Yeah.
day. And the reason that to this day there are still companies being created to solve this problem is because it has not been solved.
Right. So do
have
you look
the
at it as kind of like a, okay, you were saying Evernote, is it kind of Evernote? I think
It's
Rome
it's an
Research kind of touches on
Evernote
this.
slash Readwise slash all the others. Like there are
Right.
so many slash Notion slash Obsidian, like any type
Yeah.
of information management or knowledge management systems. It's still a problem to be solved.
Yeah.
And what I found super interesting is that I don't think it could be solved before Nostr, because I used Evernote probably for around at least 5 or 10 years, something like that. I was an Evernote user for a really, really long time. And then I don't remember exactly what it was that made me change, but I changed to something else. I can't recall the name. Maybe you remember. It was this one that it was like bullet points when it was infinitely nested lists of things. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Bullet points, infinitely nested bullet points. Was it kind of like a list based? It was not Rome, but it was some sort of markup list.
It wasn't not Rome. I think it was before Rome became so popular.
Yeah, I think there were
And
some earlier in the lineage there, but I can't recall,
yeah, but it was
which ones.
a very similar idea where you start with sort of like a mind map, but
Yeah.
looking at the mind map or interacting with mind map from a text perspective, where you create a note that's just like a title, and
Yeah.
then you enter that title, and then you have three things, and then you keep going down infinitely into the details. So you
Right.
start very
Oh, was it
broad.
not workflowy?
Workflowy.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, workflowy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
And then now we have Notion, but each one of these systems, like the issue that it has is that each one of these systems is independent. It's a silo. It's independent of the other
Right.
systems. So I accrued a lot of information and I saved a lot of knowledge in Notion, in Evernote. And then when I transitioned to this other thing, pretty much all that knowledge becomes stale. It's
Right.
really hard to discover because I'm using this other system. It doesn't interact. And I think this interaction across systems is the
Yeah.
killer app that
Yeah.
Nostr brings.
And obviously, yeah, Nostr can solve that really well.
Nostr solves that for free. Nostr solves that naturally, completely organically. It solves that problem.
Yeah.
So to me, it's super interesting. And when you get the data aspect of I'm in Evernote, or and maybe I want to interface with my data in this other way that Evernote doesn't support. So I can either go and beg Evernote to support it, or
Right.
I can transition to this other tool and start over. But if I keep my data here, then that part of the problem is gone. It's completely gone.
Right.
I don't have vendor lock-in anymore. Like Evernote, goes bankrupt. I'm not affected in any way.
Right.
And so that's one part, and I think it's very interesting. But then you think the amount of data, the amount of information that we produce, that is natively, that is not data that represents something else. The data is the thing, like, right? So, for example, an MP3, a song, the MP3 is not representing something. The MP3 is the thing. And there is so much data that the value of the data is in the data itself, that when you think about what Nostr brings to the table as well, is that each piece of data has an ID. Global ID. It's absolutely insane. So from what I'm building within Highlighter from Atlas Notes, I have Subster as well, right? It's like this music player, and people are uploading tracks to Subster. Each track is a Nostr event. Each time you listen to a track, that's a Nostr event as well. Each time someone comments on the track, that's a Nostr event as well.
Right.
And then I have Atlas or Highlighter / Atlas Notes. And I can create a list. I can take notes of the song, not like mentioning the song, but the song itself is part of the
You're like
list.
tagging it, or it kind of becomes part of an ecosystem.
I can literally drop the ID of the track ID within a list, and then my list can render the track as a subtract track within the list, within this other thing that is not a music player.
Right.
But and I can do that with so many different things, and it's gotten me so excited because I've been speaking with people that are not like, obviously in my real life, like in my mid space. I'm speaking about Nostr with a lot of people, and not everybody has been purple pilled yet. But one thing that I see is that I have a lot of friends and family that are not persuaded by the social media use case of Nostr, because they simply don't use Twitter, they don't use Facebook, they don't care about that. But they are into productivity. And then when I explain what I'm working on, then they get it. Whereas before I was telling them, oh, the SAPs. And it's like, oh, that's fun. No one created a pub key because of the SAPs. Like, I mean, some people did, but within my circle of people, no one created an account because they could get sapped.
Well, this is interesting though, because it sounds like the whole kind of notion that you come to around kind of Atlas and highlighting is around sort of the memory recording, the type A, personality use case of wanting to sort of curate and store and record and kind of hold, have everything. And I can understand the use case. I think it's a big important one for a lot of people. But I actually come at the problem from a very different side, which is I think there are new ways to participate. So it's less about me keeping for later, like that's almost like a side effect in my mind. But 100%. I have a new way that I can participate with people that I might not otherwise know to participate, or don't even know they're also interested in this thing, or they discover they're interested in it through me and then they participate with me there. So I sort of look at it from the lineage of the web, right? The web kind of grew up in this very strange way where reading and writing were very decoupled events, right? Like you could host a web server, and that was like kind of a very technical thing, and you had to know how to do HTML and, back in the day, right? And then the browser was just for reading, really. You can navigate around this whole thing, but you can't contribute at all, right? So reading and writing were very, very separate. And then, of course, like blogging brought them together a little bit, right? So now, like a web page, you could read the web page, you could also write into a web page, which was kind of novel at the time. And then Twitter made that like very accessible. I guess RSS was one step along trying to get there, but really was more of a reading technology than a reading and writing. So it wasn't very
Mm-hmm.
participatory. Twitter was much more reading and writing participatory, but still stuffed into this old architecture of, reading is separate from writing. And when I look at highlighting, I look at highlighting as anything you're reading, as you're reading it, if a sentence or a phrase captures your attention and interest, and you're like, oh, actually, I disagree with that, or +1 on that, you can highlight and comment. And now you're not just a reader of the thing, you're like a contributor, you're a collaborator. You have this like participation, feedback, interaction with the original author. And all of the people who care about that are gathered in the same place. So it becomes a little bit of like a people discovery surface
100%.
as well, right? So it's funny because they each kind of have parts of each other, but I think one of my concerns with the I think there's the productivity use case and there's people who are attracted to it, but I think it's hard for people to go from the productivity use case to the participation use case. And I think it's easy for people to go from the participation use case to the productivity use case. So it's a little bit of like, is there some product design details or some sort of habits or behavioral stuff that would help people get kind of the value out of both of them? That's sort of my kind of question, or sort of, the open one that I'd like to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why because I also see them as extremely related products, but they are their own thing in a way. That's why I think I naturally trend towards having Highlighter on one side, and then Atlas Notes. It's like it's a different UI.
Mm-hmm.
It's very intertwined, but it feels like its own product.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would keep thinking is I go to highlighter.com and I see the stuff that people within my network or my extended network or global,
Mm-hmm.
what they've been reading and what resonated with them.
Yep.
And then you can have an organic conversation, because what I see with like medium.com, for example, is that the conversation goes nowhere because you don't hang out in Medium to
Right.
to have a
Yeah.
conversation. You go in, you read, and then maybe you see someone's highlight, maybe you interact with the highlight, you add a comment or whatever, but then you leave and then you never come back to that one article.
Right.
Whereas with Nostr, I see something, I say, oh wow, this is cool. I highlight it, and then it's immediately, my network sees it immediately, whether they're using Amethyst or Damus
Right.
or whatever, they see it and they can add a comment. And I don't have to go back to that one part. Like, it solves the discoverability problem completely.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and you
that
can
makes me
have,
wonder how, because I think you're already working with some of the clients on integrating a highlight type. Is that right?
yeah.
Yep. So how does that work? Is that it references like a document and then it has its own kind
Yeah,
associated with it?
so it largely depends. So if what you're highlighting is a NIP23, a long form article on its own, like it's
Hmm.
already natively in Nostr, then I just tag that article, right? Like the another the bet 32 of the article itself, and then the content of the highlight event has whatever you highlighted, and then there's positioning to find where, like, okay, position whatever, 120 to 170 is the position I highlighted, but this is the content.
Right.
um and so that's like the easy part, because you are already talking to a Nostr event. So actually for highlighter, what I did was, okay, I want the ability to interact with this content in a native way.
Hmm.
So I added a way. There's a button that you can hit. I'm not sure how. I think it's kind of buggy at the moment because I've seen some weird output in highlighter.com, but you hit that button and it gathers the article that you're reading in Medium or whatever, and it gathers the data, the text, and it creates a Nostr event, a NIP23. So you do that, and it will show up in Avla News. It will show up in highlighter.com. It will show it's a typical Nostr event. And you can even, if you know the pub key of the author, you can even say the author of this pub key is not me, it's this guy. Otherwise, you just appear as a publisher, and we don't know who the author is. And then so that's like a bridge from web to Nostr events. But then if you don't want to do that, you can, when you highlight something, you go to medium.com and you don't want to extract the article itself. You just highlight something, and the event has a reference, which is part of the spec of Nostr. I can't remember exactly what NIP it was, but there's a spec that you can reference a URL. So you can. So then when you go back to that URL, you can say, show me all the highlights that happen on this URL. So it's a way to solve that as well.
So do you think there's a way? I mean, some of the stuff you're talking about around making a highlight, and then if somebody replies to your highlight, sort of showing up in the clients where you would be naturally consuming for discovery. Right? 'Cause you're pointing out that like you don't go to a site like Medium in order to see the replies or see other discussion going on that you've already participated with, but you might go to kind of a social media like feed, like you might see in Damus or Amethyst, where you can see what's happening and what's been contributed lately. But I think there's almost like another surface, I could imagine at least, that is like, if I go to one of these articles, whether it's referenced via a URL or via NIP23 long form, I could highlight something, and in a sense that expresses my interest in that article. It's almost like I'm subscribing to that piece of long form. And of course, like if somebody directly replies to me, that would be nice for me to see. But also, if somebody doesn't directly reply to me, but they make their own highlight on that, there's a lot of signal in that. That means this person is, cares about the same thing I care about, and they have an opinion, and maybe I want to like discuss their opinion or, disagree or agree. And we don't have a surface for that. Like it would be weird to just start throwing those into my like social media feed, right? So I feel like we need some sort of like a feed system or some sort of like, I mean, it could just be a filter on the existing feed system, but some like UI or UX kind of surface that helps me say like, okay, if I highlight it on that one, like give me like an auto subscribe to all the other highlights that come in on that thing so that I know when they're happening and then I can engage with them. But I don't know, it's more that participatory use case than the kind of pure storage for personal utility.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's super interesting because if you are doing a highlight on something that I also highlighted, there is an intersection of interest there. So you get like, because I think Nostr still has a really large discoverability problem where it's very hard to understand, like get value and like getting value off the gate on a product. And it is a protocol, but people interact with products. Getting value from the product easily is super important. Like you can have the best product, but if it doesn't deliver the value prop, you might as well not be there. And I think that's a very interesting spin on a new form of discoverability. Yeah, I really like. I'm definitely going to add that to highlighter.com.
So if we were trying to use that kind of tool, I'll take an even like more extreme focus to kind of get us started, which is like, is there a document, and you probably know at least one, but is there a document that most of the people who are using Highlighter might care to all join in together? Right? Because if you know that document, and people propose to me, they're like, oh, why don't you just do like, I don't know, the Holy Bible or something that like a lot of the world's population cares about, so that you can, you at least have like some shared context to all do the thing together before you go out and do everything. You go do like the one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually so I spinned up a node, like a very beefy node, I can't remember, like a month ago. So that basically it's connected to, I can't recall, I think it's like 300 relays, and getting each, like every single event that happens, and it creating maps of interest. So whenever I tag a node, for example, that my pub key is marked as I've tagged these nodes, or I've tagged this hashtag, or I've tagged this person. So I have that for every single pub key in Nostr.
Hmm.
I don't even really have to keep the events themselves. I'm keeping them, but I don't really have to keep the events. I just see these sets. And then it's cool because then I can do intersections of these sets. And then I can see, okay, you are, like you have similarities, or this is something that maybe you would be interested in, and with highlights, that's one instance of finding these people, or finding these notes, or finding these events that might be of value to you.
Hmm. So do you think that how does that show up then? It needs to show up on the highlighter site, or would you push it into clients somehow, or try to convince clients to have a UI to surface it?
So I think it's very hard because there is a boundary on how much you can push, like how much different use cases you can pack in a
Hmm.
generic client, or in an all-purpose client. I definitely see. So we discussed on MBK's podcast. We were talking about this idea of being able to send to some kind of relay or some kind of service, like a simple script
Hmm.
saying, give me this, like compute this and give me the results. This could be one such service where,
Hmm.
like give me highlights that I might be interested in, or give me articles that I might be
Hmm.
interested in based on, my network, based on, what I've highlighted, what I've read, stuff like that.
Is that specifically a relay type of idea, or should it be some other middleware type of
No, it's a
flavor?
middleware. Yeah, it's a
Okay.
middleware. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, 'cause it seems
Yeah.
like there's like relays are really good at kind of storing and retrieving, right? But
Yeah,
maybe all kinds of other layers.
the computing part, and the thing is that you can't really ask a relay for this data, because unless you're running a very sophisticated relay will have a very partial view of what's
Right.
going on. So the output that you would get is a subset of what you're actually interested in. So yeah, you need some kind of aggregator
Right.
that computes that for you. I mean,
So
for highlighter itself, like I can just do this without an aggregator, because I already have, like all the events, so I can just have highlighter consume this data, like just talk to my backend.
right, right. So there's like a lot of huge ideas, I think, within the space you're building. And I worry a little bit that maybe I think you mentioned this too on emails, like maybe people don't quite see all of, what it is or why it should be. And I wonder if there are ways to simplify it, because it does a lot and it can be so many things, but in
Mhm.
a sense, it's sometimes I think hard for somebody who's like I think it's hard for somebody who's new even to understand the Twitter clone use case. They're like, they show up on Damus like, what is this? How does this work? And then this
Absolutely,
is
yeah.
a new use case they've never done before. They've only touched in various small ways. So is there any way to like back it off, simplify it? Because right now I think I can like, upload a long form or have a URL or point to a NIP23. And I've, I'll be honest, I struggled a little bit to get it to do what I wanted. Not through your fault, but just I'm learning how all of these pieces fit together. So I wonder if there's
No,
a way to like
100%. And
simplify, yeah?
to be honest, while I was writing it, I started in one place, and then I started noticing these ideas, and I started moving the product in that direction. So the resulting UX is extremely extremely like poorly executed. Like if I were to write it from scratch now, I would do it different.
Hmm.
So there is a lot of UX that needs to be improved,
Hmm.
to make the UX much simpler. Someone wrote,
Hmm.
Tony, is one guy from that is a Nostr. He wrote, he wrote, like an NIP23, a long form explaining highlighter and saying, "Oh, this is so cool because you can do this and you can do that, and
Yep.
it's super cool." And then he wrote the NIP23, and he posted the URL for Avla. And then I said to him, "Okay, and here's the URL for the article that you wrote on Avla on highlighter.com." And he's like, "Oh, I didn't know you could do that."
Right.
No,
Right.
I know. Yeah.
I think sometimes the breadth of what it can be gets in the way of the kind of focus to what helps people understand the very first step. So that's why I'm an advocate of, can you find, maybe even you had that the Gigi article that you shared with me, right? That
Hmm. Yeah.
was it purple notes, orange
Purple
highlights?
text, orange highlights.
Right, right. And so that's a document that anybody who cares about Highlighter, Atlas, anything in this space probably should know about that article, probably would care about that article, and probably has opinions about, oh, this is the most important
Hmm.
part, this is the least important part. I disagree with this idea, right? And I wonder if we could all come together around that, and we don't have to worry, is it NIP23? Is it uploaded? Is
Oh
it a
wow,
URL? Like, doesn't matter. But let's
that's an
all,
interesting idea.
you, me, at least you and me, and probably at least a dozen of our friends care about that document and would be
Yeah,
happy to highlight. And we could play then. We could show each other how we want to
that's a
use it together.
very interesting idea. That's a very interesting idea. So maybe I could make the default view when you go to highlighter.com, at least for the first time, it's that document plus its highlights, plus its comments, plus its apps. Like you can interact
Yeah,
with the living text.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
very interesting.
But where you
Yeah.
just galvanize all of us doing the same thing on one. And then of course the question is planted in our minds. Oh, but why can I only do it for this one document? I want to do it for 10 documents. Now
Yeah.
I'm sort of discovering I'm turning over the cards and discovering what I want because I already understood the very, very simple focus. I don't have to learn about how it's hosted, or I just show up and the party's going because you're like the host, right?
That's very interesting. I am 100% going to do that.
Cool. Do you think is the GG piece the right one to start with, you think?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know if you saw it on highlighter.com. I had on the what tab, which is like an about tab. It's what it is. The text that I wrote there it just talks about the the article that Gigi wrote and it links to
The
it.
what is this? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. 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 I see that. And it points to it. Yeah. Because
but it's
then
cool because
also,
even within the what, it embeds a highlight event.
right.
And I was writing that I was like, oh, actually, instead of quoting, I can literally just embed the highlight.
Right, right. But there's so many new concepts. I mean, I get Nostr, but not to the extent. I think you see more of the detail of what you're doing, and then somebody who's I say like I'm like weeks behind you, but maybe a step or two ahead of about 8 billion people, right? So
Yeah.
so if I'm already a little bit trying to struggle with this, I wonder if there's a way if you can at least make it so that I can understand exactly like the Albi extension that I use. Sometimes the website complains to me that I don't have NIP7, but I do have NIP7, but I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's a problem with extensions because
yeah.
sometimes it's a race condition. Like you load a website and the website
Oh,
tries to
okay.
speak to the extension, and
Yeah.
sometimes the extension just takes longer to load. So
Right.
when the website tries to speak, it cannot find it and says, "Okay, you don't have a Nipo 7."
Right, 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 right. Okay. So there's enough sort of points of uncertainty that I think we could even, if we were all gathered around one doc, we could all kind of report where our problems are. Because otherwise, as a sort of, let's call me some naive user, I show up, I try to do this thing, and I don't even know, oh, should I complain about that one? Maybe he already knows about it. Maybe he already gets too many
Right.
complaints. Versus if we're gathered in a party, I think. Because I think it also means there's, every day somebody posts some interesting blog post. And if you just go for like, let's say, plan is the first few weeks or months, every day, whatever's like the blog post is like the current thing that you want to bring people together around,
Mhm.
and I'll show up every day and do it with you. But
Awesome.
whatever's the interesting latest Nostr post that somebody made, we highlight together, we discuss in that format.
I
But
love
make
that.
it so,
Yeah.
pull the complaints out of us, solicit, tell us it's okay. You know?
Yeah, one of the things because I struggle to with the decision of on like the product decision of what to show on the first like when you visit the site for the first time.
Hmm.
At first I had the what, which explains what it is, but then I thought, okay, people don't want to read like a bunch of text on
Right,
this is
right,
what this does. Like the product should try and show you what it is. Um,
right.
and then I started thinking, okay, so what's the main currency of this website? What is
Right.
the most interesting? Like what is different about it? And it's okay, the focus of the website is not the articles, it's the highlights. And the highlights, like kind one is the king of Damos. And things happen like kind 9735 like saps are subservient to the kind one, but kind one is
Yep.
the thing, right? So it's a kind one centric client. So I was thinking, okay, I came up highlight is kind 9802. It's a random number. There's no meaning behind it. So I was thinking, okay, in the same way that you open Damos and you see kind ones, in the same way you should open highlighter and see kind highlights.
Right.
But I do think, because I also noticed that I go to highlighter.com and I made it, and even I go in and it's like, okay, I need more context.
Right, right. Well, and because there's so many new ideas here, right? So
That's the
take
thing.
like the social media use cases that people have built a lot of clients for on Nostr is almost like there's in a from a product and UX sense, there's intentionally not a lot of new ideas. Like there's new ideas in sort of the infrastructure and how relays work, but the UI is meant to be like, okay, we can understand that Shaka and like are kind of the same, but
Yeah.
otherwise it's not really meant to be a newish idea. It's a new way to do kind of an existing idea. This is both new ideas because it's like, what are the like? Is a highlight itself a document that can be highlighted? Like, I don't know. I can't answer that question. Maybe it is, maybe it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. It
But
is, but
yeah, I figured. But but when you talk about that first visit to the experience, like what should be on the homepage of Highlighter? I think did I ever talk to you about this guy when I was working on related ideas years ago? I was talking to a guy named Chris Pyack. I'll actually share this because it may be instructive. So this guy has this document. Can you see my screen share here?
I can see it. Yeah.
Okay. So he has a document at the top of his Twitter called docs. It's called frameworks v 0.2 and it's docs.google.com. So if I click this, I hope you can still see, right?
I
Does
can
that
see it.
navigate
Yeah.
okay? Oh, but it didn't go to the thing I was trying to show. Let me see. Maybe if I stop sharing and I start sharing this document. Okay, can you see this one now? This is the Google Docs.
Okay. Now I can see it.
Okay, so this when I come here, I'm reading a Google Doc that he wrote, and these are all a bunch of it's almost like a blog post that's a live blog post. That's how he frames it. So it's like here's his ideas, and you can show up here and you can highlight things, you can make comments. You see people here who've made some comments. He's cleaned up a lot, but this thing sometimes has like hundreds of comments on it at any given time. And so you're reading, you can highlight, you could comment, right? And so the document to be highlighted is like the core thing, and people come here and do that. So it's actually very easy for me to like read the core document and then see that other people have left these highlights.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And I can see, oh, like
Yeah.
whoever these people are have these opinions, and there's like some questions and further discussions. And he's actually, I mean, he's been having this for, I don't know, a year or two, and it's like lots of resolved content. So these aren't even all of them, but this was very, very actively highlighted document. But I think this experience actually clarifies, at least in my mind, it clarifies what, sort of what a highlighting service can be. It's like it's a document and a bunch of people gathering around that, weighing in and highlighting and commenting on that. So I think like, yeah, the Google Docs metaphor works for me with like a single page. And I wonder like, does that feel good for you as like kind of a starting experience for kind of the homepage or no?
Yeah, in a way, what I'm thinking is that the screen real estate is very, like what document. Okay, you can start with GGs, but what document are you going to show? Because you can only show one or two maybe.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, um, like if I go into highlighter and then I see a document that I have like care zero about, I look at it, it's like, what is this? Like I don't get it, and then I just leave. Um, but I
What
do
if the
agree.
homepage were kind of the Google Docs like style list of here's the 5 documents that have been highlighted, and you can see the little avatars of the people who participated in the discussion. And then if you click on those, then you get the full document view with the highlighting available. And you then have sort of all of the things that do exist. You don't have to add a document. You don't have to understand any of that. You just show up, you see which documents, you see who's participating. And so to galvanize it, to kind of kickstart the flywheel, all you need is a few friends who care about the same documents. And I think we know enough people who care about all the same documents that
Yeah.
you could get a good like homepage with maybe a dozen documents with dozens of people contributing and participating in each.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Yeah, because I do think that when you go in, it depends a lot on what has been recently highlighted. And there's been a lot of people just testing it. So you go in
Right.
and you see like a highlight of something that is like completely worthless,
All right.
like a single word or something that makes like zero sense, and it's not important. Um, but I do see that very often I go in and it lacks context. What I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
the content that I'm seeing, it has zero context. Um, yeah, yeah. I there is something
Because
there.
yeah, because I think if you can clarify that first experience and get people participating, then I think some people will go off and want to add their own. You can have a button or explanation of how to do that. And then some people will say, look, I don't want to use this in public. I want to use this in a private research,
Yeah.
memory use case like you're talking. And then people will understand that too, and they can go in that direction. I think it's harder to go from like I'm using this for my personal memory to now I'm going to participate with people. And I think that's where, I think Rome research in particular has always tried to get the collaboration, but has mostly been really good at the kind of single kind of user small team style.
Yeah, I got a lot of people asking me about the highlighting in private.
Hmm.
Like they see the value. It's super interesting because the highlighter, it became kind of popular. Like a lot of people started using it as a test and saying, "Oh, this is cool." Um, then I noticed, because as I was writing it, I was like blowing my mind a little bit as I was working on it. At some point, I did a highlight on Gigi's article, and then I zapped the highlight, and it
Hmm.
sent, like, I zapped the highlight with like 10,000 sats, and it
Yeah.
sent 88,000 sats to Gigi. I was like,
Yeah.
holy, okay, that's super cool. And then I was thinking, okay, you can put splits all the way from someone writes an article, someone highlights the article, then someone boosts the highlight, and then someone
Hmm.
boosts the boost, right? And if someone sees that last boost, a sap could go from the person that gave you the content through the whole chain all
Right.
the way to the author. Like,
Right.
someone wrote this, but there was a lot of distribution until you got it. And you can reward the whole chain of events that got you that thing that you found
Is
valuable.
that relatively easy to do today? Because I know there's this lightning prisms idea that I think was Gigi had floated it or wrote about it, but somebody else had floated it before. And is that required to do that, or we already have kind of enough?
It's sort of required. I mean, I didn't do it without the prism, so the UX suffers
Hmm.
unless you give a, like on Alvi, you set a budget. You literally send all, like, there are 4 hubs, you send 4 payments.
I see.
If you have to approve each payment, the UX is kind of,
Yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
What I want to do, and I'm going to write it. I started writing it. Started writing, but this service, but that we need some kind of service that you can, on the go, you can, like, without having to call any API or anything like
Hmm.
that, create splits between npavs. So you say, like, npav 1 split x, npav 2 split x, npav 3 split x at service.com,
Hmm.
and you send one payment to that npav, and then the service.com is doing the splits for you. But right now, so for example, BTC Pay server, they added split support,
Hmm.
Prism support, but you need to go into BTC Pay server, and you need to create
I see.
the thing, right? So it doesn't really work for
Right.
what I want to
It
do.
needs to
It,
just
it
be an
works
address
when
you
it's
send
something
to, right?
static. Yeah, if you like, say for example, on a podcast, you want to do a split on the podcast guest, then yeah, you can. It's one podcast, so you go in and you create the split, and then you put that email address, that LN URL on
Hmm.
the podcast, and that's it. But if you want to do this programmatically, then you need something like this. And I'm going to create. I actually spoke with Gigi about this because I'm definitely either I or someone will create a service. It's trivial to write. It's it's just sitting down and writing it. There's nothing special about it.
Right.
But yeah, as I was saying that as I was working on this, I was seeing, okay, it started like connecting all the dots, and then I released it, and I got on a call with Gigi, and we were just like going,
Oh yeah,
like Galaxy Brain, just going, let it go, and saying, okay, and how is this like addressable content, or how is it going to play with this and this, and just letting it fly.
Yeah.
And then you start seeing the potential, and it's massive.
Oh yeah.
But it's super cool because very few people saw what this is.
Right.
I think like maybe 20 people realized what it is, and that's like my bad, because the UX is so freaking complex that it doesn't, and it's not fully there yet either.
Right.
Like functionally, it's not there. So you need to start extrapolating and extrapolate from the extrapolation. And, after a few cycles, you get to, oh my god.
Right. And I think like a new user needs to see something very familiar that's very easy, like maybe one click, one new action that they learn about. Like even think about how hard it is for some people to even understand zaps within Daunus. It's
insane.
It's like crazy. It feels simple if you kind of know all the parts hung together, but then if it's like new, you're like, wait, what? I'm sending Bitcoin across to somebody that like you saw Cassie yesterday. It kind of like was blowing her mind.
Oh, the Cassie thing was so funny.
Did you instigate that? Did you know her? Or?
I didn't know her. She's just right in my feed. She was saying, "Oh, I'm testing," and then I went to her profile, and her profile said, "I told you that I really like the word curiosity." And she said, "I have a lot of questions," or I'm here to ask questions. I said, "Oh man, that's such a cool bio." Yeah. So I said, "Okay, let's give her a warm welcome."
And then you memed her into
insane. Some people think that that is a bot that I wrote.
I know. I said it was like a new micro app. I said, good launch strategy, Pablo.
I might do that, man. It works so well. I might do it.
Right. If only all product launches could be as successful, huh?
You never know. It's so weird because I've noticed this before. Like I've launched products my whole life, but you never know what resonates. It's so hard to predict what's going to.
Well, that's why I think your approach of high volume is very effective. Is high volume.
This stage, I think it's important. At this stage, because we don't know, right? Like I think for example, I think the highlighter slash Atlas nodes, like that mix, what I've noticed, to me, I see so much value there. Like it is like literally hard to go to sleep from everything that I see that can become. And it's super interesting because the people, like many people that I admire in like in this very small space that we inhabit, started DMing me and saying, "Oh, this is something important. This is something else." And I don't think that we know what it is either. Like I don't feel like I fully grasp what it means. So for example, I was speaking about this with my wife. Again, she doesn't have an NPAB. Right. She's done into social networks. Like she used Twitter. It was super interesting. She used Twitter for 1 month last year, and she went from 0 to 20,000 followers.
Wow.
Yeah, she wrote 3 threads that went super viral. Like one of them got 18,000 retweets.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
what were the topics?
Insane. The topics were self-actualization and stuff like that, and habits and stuff like that. And then she's like, "Oh, this is like super boring," and then she deleted the account. But it's but she's a writer. That's also what
Hmm.
helped to
Yeah. So she has
and her
already kind of
Twitter.
structure in her mind
Yeah.
of the kinds of things that she wants to say.
And now she's writing a fiction book, and yeah, so she's been seeing what I build, and I take notes because we don't have a whiteboard here, so I take notes on just like the windows,
Wall.
with
Yeah.
with a sharpie. So I have notes all over the house.
Uh,
There's full of notes.
right.
So she sees what I work on, and she started connecting with it, and she told me, so can highlighter do X and Y and Z?
Hmm.
And so, oh yeah, actually, yeah, I haven't thought about it, but yeah, I can do this and this and that. Yeah, I would actually like really want to use that for the book that I'm writing, because
Mm, yeah.
one of the things that she can do is she can take notes, like research notes, for how, like a bakery with these attributes in Paris,
Yep.
so for example, right? Like if
Yep.
you want to write a scene, you want it to connect to something that is real. You don't want to do, oh yeah, people in Paris don't do that kind of thing, because
Right.
then the book feels fake. Um, and then she can start gathering ideas, and then she could interact with people that are seeing those ideas, and
Hmm.
they can leave notes or they can leave comments, or like someone else might have another idea and someone else might come in and sup that idea
Yep.
within her research list,
Yep.
sup that idea to the top as the most interesting idea.
Yep.
So now she's starting to use that as a way to reach, like, the product is barely there, but for
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
one particular use case, it kind of works
That's
already.
awesome. That's actually when we were starting our work on Highlighter, which is many, many years ago. The very first use case we were trying to solve is for kind of more long form published books. So not even the web, because I thought it would always be great if we could read like the marginalia that other people who read that same book, taking
Hmm.
notes and stickies and writing in the margins. But if you could read those things, it just adds like an extra layer of dimension kind of across time of not just the author's thoughts, but the other people who've read it and what their thoughts are on it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because when you think about it, the books always, for centuries, have been very broadcast-like, and
Yeah.
there is no back and forth. And it's super interesting that you say that, because always when I go to a friend's house, that it's like I'm into reading, or that friend
Hmm.
is also into reading. Like Alex Vetsky is a good friend of mine, and he's shared many books with me, and he shares his books, and he has notes on the book,
Yep.
and to me that's like, okay, this is super interesting
That's
part.
cool. Yeah. Yeah.
That's absolute gold, absolute gold.
Yeah.
So my wife, one of the things that she asked me is, because she reads a lot of books to inform the books that she writes,
Hmm.
um, and she told me, can you actually highlight stuff that will go to highlighter and highlight it from Amazon Kindle? I said,
Hmm.
yeah, actually, if you use like the read.amazon.com, you just
Yep.
load the highlighter extension, and then you can just highlight that, and it will go, and then you can organize the the highlights that you did in different lists, and then you can add comments to the highlights, and you
Right.
can have like a whole discussion about around that one particular highlight or around that list. Um, but yeah, it's super interesting because all these ideas are something new, you know.
Yep.
So I didn't think about highlighting Kindle books
Yeah.
on on a highlighter.
It's funny because it does sort of a thing that's a little bit opposite of what we often think about in the web. Is like we think of the web as this like very like vibrant participatory space, but sometimes when somebody writes a blog post, unless you are going to use their commenting system, which is sometimes some third party thing, it doesn't make sense. So it just becomes this like read only thing. And when you start to highlight something or comment on a highlight, like a specific piece of text, what you're doing is you're sort of creating a heat map of a long form thing and showing what are the most interesting kind of nuggets or kind of highlights, the moments within that long form that are most interesting, that are most worthy. And you might take, I think historically people say, okay, kind of write a tweet, and if it gets a lot of attention, then build out those ideas, write a blog post. If that gets a lot of attention, then maybe it turns into a series of blog posts that eventually becomes a book. So it's kind of like,
Hmm.
increasing kind of seriousness, let's say, or kind of like, you both have like these more ossified formats, but they are more kind of considered, let's say. But you don't want to do the very considered thing until you actually at least get some feedback that the kind of less considered one or sort of more flippant thing works. But once you have the considered one, you can sort of run it back and say, okay, you wrote this, 500 pages, but actually this paragraph really resonates with me. And you then take something that is considered but long and you make it much more info dense. And you see this actually in every format of media. And so I think highlighting, we're talking right now about kind of highlighting with Nostr using kind of long form web-ish documents, web-like documents, blog posts,
Hmm.
let's say. But I think it applies to like these books, like you're saying your wife is noticing. But I think it also applies to like, let's say a long form video, right? So here we've been hanging out for like what, an hour on video. You could imagine, and people do this all the time, right? Is they make the highlights, they make like the YouTube shorts or the TikTok of the video because it's the most info dense. Here's the teaser idea,
Mm.
here's the free smells that are going to help you understand what the core concepts are, see if you're excited enough that you want to get into the whole thing. And so you're taking all this long form and you're chopping it up into these like info dense moments, but I think it actually applies across every type of media. So blogs, books, website, video that you're watching, podcasts that you're listening to. It's like everything needs highlights in a sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is so much value in the creation of those highlights, right? Like I watch a Rogan episode for 3 hours, and then I find the tidbits that totally resonated with me, and I condense them into these 2 minutes or 1 minute
Yep.
that someone else can consume and see if it resonates with them and if they can go back to the original source. Yeah, there's yeah, and what I keep thinking is there is so much valuable information, and it's just finding that information is such a hard problem. And
Right.
when you can use these signals from your network, from your extended network, from intersection of interest with other people, it's what becomes so interesting. And the more what I think will end up happening is that Nostr is just clearly so much better at information distribution than any other system, um, and it's interesting because it's a problem that we've been trying to solve for literally decades since the web was created. It was web like hyperlinks was
Hmm.
this idea of a document is referencing this other document, but it was never really native. There was no structure in the HTTP protocol
Yep.
to give. Like we try to do the open graph thing and the semantic web, and it
Right.
just
Right.
totally fails. It
Hmm.
doesn't work because like Amazon, for example, they don't really need to do semantic web. Like they gain zero from doing semantic web, but they're
Right.
helping their competition. Whereas if you adopt Nostr, um, you're gaining from the network effects of Nostr. So you are incentivized to serve your data in this open protocol way.
Right.
Um, Whereas like you gain something from interacting with the data in this way. So if I play that out, then that means that more and more and more data will come into Nostr in a native way, not
Yeah.
a representation. In a native way, each type of data. So, for example, Stemster is a good example. Like Stemster, they created a kind of a piece of music
Yeah.
that is a beat or drums or a guitar
Yep.
or whatever it might be. And then other people can interact with that data again natively. And it's hard to explain why the natively part is so important, but
Right.
it's absolutely essential. The
Yeah.
native aspect is not a representation of the data. It's not
Right.
a pointer to the real data.
It is
It
the thing.
is the
Yeah.
data. It's like the difference between Bitcoin and a Bitcoin IOU. A
Right.
Bitcoin IOU is pointing to a Bitcoin. You might or might not get it, but it's
Right.
not the thing, right?
Right.
Um, and and then Stemster comes in, right? And they are creating this data, and then I can go in with Subster, and I can have the people that are interacting with Stemster create a shape around this data, package it, and
Hmm.
then publish this data on Subster, which makes it available on any client that is Subster compatible or 31337 kind compatible. And it's the whole chain of how that track was created can be referenced, and like you can go and see it, like cryptographically you can go and
Right.
see it.
Right.
And and I think this will play out for every kind of information.
Right.
And so then I think, okay, so if not, probably not all, but if most data becomes Nostr native, and then you can cross-reference every piece of data
Yep.
natively, then the amount of value that you can create from interacting with the data, from organizing the data, from curating the data, it's so staggering. It's like I struggle to understand what it means,
Right. Right.
to
And
understand the
I,
implications.
yeah, and I think I share that same excitement about what, it's sort of like it's so vast. How do we even handle it? How do we do something? And so one of the things that I'm always kind of thinking about is, you know, I think about the challenge to explain to a user who's new what a Zap is. It's so easy,
Hmm.
but it's still a challenge. And it's a new feature. It's a thing you could not do before. It's totally new. And it feels easy to understand if you're kind of like plugged into all of the philosophy, ideology, kind of. But if you're just like here for like, hey, show me something cool, like what's this all about? I feel like the Zap is like a small step in maybe our minds, but it's a large step for a new user to grok what's going on. And is there
Yeah,
a way
yeah.
to make a frontier where they don't have to necessarily buy into or understand all the ideology or all the data portability features, but more they get a product that actually, oh, I can actually send Bitcoin to somebody? That's like amazing. I didn't know you could do that, right? That's like a product feature. And so is there a product feature version of, highlighting or music serving or music componentization that we can actually start to touch in a DAW, use, mix in a new way, and it just becomes like delightful how easy that is and surprising to people?
Yeah, I think the more so I really like the way Jack put it in terms of we are running away from, and we also need to consider, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but we also need to consider the running towards.
Right.
and
Hmm.
and he mentioned that SAPS was the first thing that felt like running towards,
Yeah.
which I fully resonated with me, and I fully agree with that. And the thing is that I think the more we build stuff that is in the bucket of running towards, the less of a mental model that we have of how this thing works, right?
Yeah.
Like you retweet or reboost something, and you know exactly what's going to happen. Like there
Yeah.
is zero doubt of, okay, I see these arrows pointing to each other. I click it, and it's going to send it to my network. Okay,
Right.
I have no explanation is required for the
Hmm.
Shaka.
Right.
No explanation is required. We've been doing this model for decades. Um, but the SAP is different, and that is harder to understand. And
Right.
Cassie said yesterday this beautiful note. She said, "Oh wait, SAPs are bitcoins," which
Right. I mean, these
phenomenal.
these things we take for granted. Even a boost.
Oh yes,
Sometimes when you're boosting, you don't like the name of the person who wrote the original note is not on the relay that you're pulling from, and so
right.
even that is like, well, why don't I just see the name? I see this crazy string of characters. Like even the things that we're like, oh yeah, okay, don't worry about it, that's fixable. But it's a potential point for confusion. So zaps, think about how small zaps are, but then think about how big they are. I think they're
Oh
profound,
yeah.
but then also you need to understand like, wait, this is actual Bitcoin, and oh, I need to connect a Lightning wallet. Why doesn't it just have a Lightning wallet? Well, I mean, there's good reasons, but like
Yes.
also it's a lot to think through. So I think every new product almost, can we make it only as challenging as a Zap to understand that, because then I think you can do more running toward, right?
I I think so. What I struggle, and I'm very curious to know how you feel about this. But the way I see it is, you first need to understand the nature of what you're doing
Hmm.
very well, in order to be able to condense what it is you're explaining. Um,
Right.
like if you try to condense human action in a few words without having read it 6 times, you're going to
Right.
fail, right?
Right.
Like you're going to convey the wrong message.
Yep.
um,
Yep.
and I wonder if that's the same here, if because whenever I try to explain what highlighter is and what like everything within this product, within this realm that I'm building, I notice that I struggle, because I don't understand it yet.
Right.
um, and yeah, I wonder if you can do both at the same time. Like if you can do, say you create like the medium interface, for example, that is
Hmm.
known. We understand how it works. We've been doing it. We understand what it means, but it doesn't leverage this big part that Nostr is giving you, right? Um, and I wonder if we model the user interactions, at first. If we model behind these known patterns, then we might miss out on finding what's the full value that can be gathered, like that
Right.
can be taken from the fact that you are using Nostr with all these amazing properties that it gives you. Um, so yeah, I I'm I guess my question is, can we do both the intuitive easy version and the explorative version at the same time, or the fact
Yeah.
that you're doing one means that you cannot really do the other one?
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole, a lot of people who look at Nostr and, have some negativity around it, it's almost like it's too simple in their minds. They're like, huh, that could have been done 10
Totally.
years ago. That didn't work before. Why would it work now? So I
Because it
think,
needed Lightning Network. It could not be done before. I am 100% sure that Nostr exists now, and it could not be done before.
because of the Schnorr
Because you
signatures,
needed,
or,
so you need Nostr, right? Like Nostr is the thing that we're discussing. Be,
yeah.
be, below Nostr, you needed Lightning Network to exist. And for the Lightning Network to exist, you need Bitcoin to exist, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
and the reason I say that is, you cannot really have a decentralized protocol, a decentralized media where someone from Iran or North Korea can come in and can
Yeah.
say whatever the hell they want,
Yeah.
without having, because at the end of the day, everything, like we think of Bitcoin in layers, and at the
Yeah.
very basic layer, we have the economic layer.
Yep.
If you want to have enough users, you need the physical hardware that supports that those users can interact. And if you base that architecture, like the physical hardware, if you base that on PayPal or any kind of fiat, then there
Right.
is always the choke point of
Yep.
this speech is not allowed.
Yep.
So what I think is that literally it could not happen before, because without Bitcoin, and particularly without Lightning Network, we could not have the infrastructure to run these systems.
Right. But I guess like once, like, I could, I guess I could imagine somebody painting the argument that it's a bad idea to launch Bitcoin in 2009 because 10 minutes is too long for payments. And so if you want to do payments, like, it's dead in the water, don't even bother, right? And I think
Yeah.
what we've learned over time is it's okay if it's like deeply flawed in a certain way, as long as it gets some really important things right. And then if you get those important things right, you can build social consensus around that's good enough, and we're going to agree to use that one. And now we're going to build these other layers. And so Lightning is many years later. And that actually solves most of those kind of payment speed problems and even cost problems, right? But it's you were telling us back in Costa Rica, you're like, you're kind of just like blind and struggling and trying stuff, right? It's almost that image comes to my mind where it's like, okay, you can say Bitcoin 10-minute, resolution, or even, an hour if you want 6 confirmations. It's just not good. It's not going to work for payment. So you could throw your hands up and say, give up, right? Of course, good thing nobody gave up, because there's somebody else can come along and find a good way to make payments work. And I almost feel like in the case of, like, let's say, take it to Zaps or take it to highlighting. Like, I think it's okay to have like a flawed version if it can do something new that people see and understand really well, right? So in my mind, it's like, can we have a highlighter that has like the 10-minute, block resolution problem? It's okay because it doesn't need to do everything. It just needs to do like the one thing. And I'll point out one of the things, it's not necessarily the one, but one of the things that it can do well, and I touched on this before, but the idea that if I highlight on Gigi's article, if you show me Gigi's article, so everybody who shows up sees Gigi's article, and I highlight on that, and if you can then show me updates when anybody else highlights on that thing that I care about, that's already massively new value that I don't get from highlighting on, Medium or something, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not, and Medium doesn't connect to Twitter in the way that you're, describing. And so it doesn't say, hey, open data everywhere. It's just like, hey, that thing you highlighted, you can now meet new people through the thing that you highlighted. And hey, isn't that cool? And so to me, it's like broken in every way. You can't submit NIP23s and you can't do URLs, and like it's broke, but we know those can be solved. We know the solutions. You already built the solutions, right? But in a sense, can we pretend like they don't exist just to simplify, to get the one thing, to understand that one thing well?
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, yeah, that the 10-minute analogy was very powerful. That resonated a lot.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, good.
Yeah, because it is true that if you need to connect, right, with, okay, you're creating a new product and it needs to do something that is valuable, and it needs to be, like the typical it's got to be 10x better than what it's replacing. And yeah, I do agree. Yeah, I do agree that's that's definitely not being conveyed on the current incarnation. It's like the building blocks are there. They're just they're just in the wrong order at the moment.
Right. I think in a sense you're too smart because you know all of what it can be and how it all works, and so you're almost too deep in all of what can be. I wonder if you sort of like, I'm just thinking out loud, but could you maybe you interview Cassie, because she's like interested and curious about this, right? She's asking questions and she really wants to learn. But if you explain all the data portability, it's probably like, who cares, right? But if you say, hey, look, you can do this one thing, and my question is the threshold. Do her eyes light up? Does she say, oh wow, you can do that? The same way she did when she saw Zaps. She just lit up. I could feel it through reading the note. I was like, wow.
Yeah, 100%.
She got it. Yeah. So can you use that as the threshold for product development? It's like, will Cassie's eyes light up when you just explain the one thing, right?
Because she's becoming a new meme. Will Cassie's eyes light up? Boom.
Right? And it's just because I think one of my goals in everything I do in Nostr and creating videos and education is I just want to make it more accessible to more people. I want more people, like, I'm very passionate about it, and I understand the abstract data portability. It's very exciting to me, but also I want it to be so simple that when I tell somebody one sentence, their eyes light up, right? Like they know why this is interesting and new and why it matters to them.
Yeah, well, that's one thing, and that's what I've been harassing you for us to get on the call, because I've been one thing that I notice is that when someone is working on a problem, they get really close to it, and I feel like super close to this, and I see, like, I can touch in my mind.
Yeah.
I can touch all the opportunities that I can see. I think there's a lot more, but but then bringing this to someone that spent a total of 1 second thinking about this,
Right.
I noticed that like I stumble, and I don't know if you saw you saw the note because I sent it to you. That I wrote, I think I need to explain more what I'm working on in ways that are more understandable by people, because very often I work on a product for a few days and then it's like, oh, this is amazing, this is super awesome. Obviously everybody will get it immediately. Even when I launched Highlighter, William JB, he tried it out and he said, oh, this is cool. And then I think it was Walker that he wrote, oh, this changes the web, or this fixes the web, or something like that. Like he got it. Like Walker got it. Like Walker, I know that he got it. And then this was a couple hours later after JB tried it, and he said, I didn't understand it at first, but yeah, this is absolutely amazing, and I'm going to integrate it on Damos as well. But even for someone like William, you know, is obviously understanding what this means is not just about how smart you are. There's also a lot about the context and what the product is showing you to make that case clearer. But yeah, what I was thinking yesterday was, okay, I need someone very smart who can, like, we can get in an exploratory conversation where we discover what's like this truth. I was being super fan of like exploratory conversations where you go in and the process of the conversation is the goal itself. And but you're making me say things in super interesting ways.
Yeah, and you know, like one thing is I've advocated for at least what my favorite simplification idea is. So if there's a way to try that, maybe we try like that with just, you know, a dozen people. Anybody can participate, but like maybe at least I think we could pull together at least a dozen people who would care about doing that, right? Like the original author, you, me, maybe Will, like whoever it is that would care about it, and Walker, and people who've touched it, and at least get that one going. And then once that one is going, it's like there's all these questions, like if I highlight something on there and I have an NSEC already in Albi, is it automatically publishing it to a note that is going to show up in my feed on all of Nostr, like in Damus, like in is it kind one is the one? Does that happen or does it not? I don't know.
That's kind of one. So that's one thing that I'm still, it's unrelated to this, that I'm still struggling with, because we discussed this on NBK's podcast yesterday, because the thing is that when for discoverability reasons, you do want the kind one, right? Because that's the kind that Damus, Amethyst, and all these clients, Snort, all these clients are going to show you. But then what I think is, okay, Nostr, for the most part, Nostr started as a microblogging replacement, right? A microblogging protocol or tool. But that's not the only use case, and we're seeing that. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, if I'm not interested in writing a microblogging client, it's not something that moves me. There are so many people already working there. Really good solutions already. I'm just not interested in kind ones.
Sure.
I mean, as a user, of course, but I'm not interested in writing that client. So always, by definition, my clients will be non-kind ones. Like Subster is this other kind, Highlighter is this other kind, and Nostr is this other kind. You know, like they are all different kinds. But then if my client is creating a non-kind one note, say, for example, an Nostr post for like a Craigslist post, that note will not be displayed on Snort, will not be displayed by Amethyst, etc. But then, okay, so then I suffer from discoverability. I cannot tap into growth loops to leverage that network, right?
Yeah.
But then if I do create the kind one, then that means that kind one is kind of like king of the castle,
Right.
and then non-kind ones nodes are subservient to kind ones, and then it's like the protocol itself is centralized over kind one.
Right.
Uh,
Well, I mean, I
and
think a lot of attention. Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah, and I keep thinking that that would mean that non-kind ones are second-class citizens on the Nostr ecosystem, and then it kind of sucks because if you create a non-kind one and a kind one, which is what Wavap or no Wavman,
Yeah.
the player
Yep.
that Wavlake did, that's the way they're doing it. So each track is its own thing, and then there's a kind one with a link to the thing, and when you sub something, you're actually supping the kind one. So in that way, the non-kind one is kind of like, it's
Yeah.
it,
Well,
it's irrelevant.
yeah. Well, I think we have like a very, let's say, traditional view of what a kind one is. And I think we have that view because Twitter is that way, which Twitter is, centralized service. And so every tweet gets pushed into kind of the same feed and gets sort of selected from across, whatever algorithms they use. But you could imagine that a kind one doesn't have to be so centralized or kind of decided everything or nothing. There could be different types of surfaces that could surface almost like kind ones with other metadata attached to them. So like imagine the Waveman. I think it would be annoying if, I'm following you on Nostr, and then every time you switch tracks on Waveman, it showcases in front of me. It's like, okay, too many things. Okay, I
Yeah.
get it. But also, if it's never shown, that that will mean the thing will just never be able to have life, right? So I almost think there's like a kind one is like a centralizing hub, but maybe there should be interfaces that allow you to filter kind ones by some other metadata, so that I can be like, oh, I'm ready to go into music mode. So show me all of the kind ones that came from Waveman or from kind of the Waveman kind, but maybe aggregate them. Don't publish every one. So maybe only publish like the first time you click play, but not every subsequent track selection,
Yeah.
for
So
example.
from the UX perspective, that you would just do by saying when you go on demos, for example, when you go to music
Hmm.
mode, then it would just subscribe to these non-kind ones, and that would be
Hmm.
like organic and can do aggregation, it can do whatever it wants. Um, and yeah, I mean, so one thing that we discussed with Will is that then we could have a way for for because obviously when you use Nostr, you're producing a lot of events, right? Like you send a like, and that's one kind.
Yep.
You delete something, and it's a different kind. So we have a lot of kinds that are actions. They're not content per se.
Right.
So you don't want to see on your feed like actions. You don't want to see, okay, a like, or a delete. It
Right.
comes into
Right.
your feed. A delete. That would be like weird.
Yep.
But there are non-kind ones that are content focused. Like a track on Subster is content focused. There is a
Hmm.
content to it. So what we were discussing is a way for clients to, without being able to handle every single kind, because if this works, there will be hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of content kinds.
Right.
So
And you can't push
it
them
would
all
be a
through the
very,
main interface. It would just get too messy, right?
it would get too messy. The code base would be an absolute nightmare. Like UX would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
But maybe there is a way for us to coalesce around a fallback mechanism where, say, for example, Damus doesn't support Subster like tracks, like music. Okay, but maybe the event itself, it has enough data for Damos to construct with that data something that is useful to the end user. From my perspective, that's the approach that I like the most, because I think that scales well. It doesn't create any extra burden on. It's kind of like sidechains in a way. It doesn't create any extra burden on client like kind one client developers, and at the same time, it doesn't hinder the discoverability that Nostr gives, which I think is like one of the superpowers of Nostr. Is this
Right.
like you can create an app and you immediately have users, and that's like
Right.
super powerful.
So how would
You
that
have like
work
distribution.
in kind of the highlighter idea? Would you always write a highlight to not a kind one, or you would write it to a kind one, like, or something in between? Because I think my next question is the real question, which is, what about other people highlighting on my highlight? What, commenting or replying or re-highlighting a thing that I already highlighted? And then what about other people highlighting different parts of the same page? Like, how do I ever get that into a surface that I'm frequently consuming so that I notice that it happens, so that I can know, oh, there's more activity on this thing I care about. Let me go back to the thing I care about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, right now, if you create a highlight on Highlighter right now, it creates a 9802 event. So that will not be displayed on Damos at the moment. So
Hmm.
we'll explicitly support that kind, right?
Hmm.
So
And
it will be
just insert it
nicely.
into the feed next to kind
It
ones.
will be inserted into the feed, displayed differently. It
Okay.
will be displayed. It's not a kind one, so maybe it can show the title, show something else. He's also going to do the same thing for long form for Nick 23.
Hmm.
It's not going to display like the whole text, but like the title, the
Yep.
author, maybe word count, maybe an abstract or something like that.
And can you tap
This
through and there's like a handler for
and
that,
you
or?
tap through and you can see the thing, or you can go to or it takes you to Avla News or something like that, right? But
Hmm.
you from that place, but that solves discoverability, right? Like you
Right.
wrote something, and unless you go to Avla or to this like highlighter or these other things, you never notice. Um, this Someone like you write something on Avla, and then I'm on Damos or I'm on Snort, and I see it on my feed. It's not the entire thing, right? But it's
Hmm.
title, word count, time to read, whatever.
Yep.
A couple of images, whatever it might be. And then
Yep.
I just tap and I can read it. Same thing for highlights. Because it's going to support it natively, it's going to do that. So it's going to be how it works. Today, if the highlights are not displayed on Damos, they are displayed on Snort, um, but only when you reply to something. So
Mm.
you highlight something, I go to highlighter.com, I see your highlight, and I add a comment. Then what I write is a kind one, right? So my interaction with you, that's a kind with your highlight, that's a kind one.
Your
You are
reply to my
tagged.
highlight is a kind one.
I reply to your highlight, and you will see, like, you will be tagged. And at the highlight itself is tagged. That's a kind one. So what I wrote is displayed on Damos, is displayed on Snort.
Hmm.
Damos currently doesn't handle it, and that's what we were discussing. Um, how to solve that. The way Snort does it is if someone goes to my reply to you, it will display the raw event of your highlight, which has the content, but it has a bunch of other data. So
Right.
it needs to improve. But the content on that you highlighted is there. So
Right.
we could come up with a fallback mechanism where these clients don't need to support absolutely everything. There is
Right.
just this, okay, get this data, this data, this data, put it together, and that's the data that you should use to render this thing that you don't know how to render.
Right. Right.
Um,
But
but
I
yeah, I
worry
think
if the original highlight has no way to get pushed into kind of a feed, like the kind one feed, then there's no discoverability for the opportunity to get the reply unless somebody knows to go off to Highlighter to go find it.
Yeah.
And then sort of the cycles of like participation kind of never get instigated in a sense. Like I go off on Highlighter, I highlight, nobody notices it, and then they just go back to doing whatever they were doing. They never bothered to reply.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, if you go in to say, for example, highlighter, and then reply to me, on a, that's a kind one. So you could reply from
Right.
Damos, or you could reply from highlighter, and then I will see
Hmm.
it on Damos, or I will see it on Snort. And we can have a conversation. But then if you go to highlighter.com, then you see the entire conversation happening around that particular
Could
highlight.
could you make it optional? Actually, the highlighting that I used on the most recent version of Highlighter, I think I can highlight, but I can't add a comment. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you would
Okay.
reply to your own highlight, basically.
Oh, I see. Okay. So I was
Yeah,
imagining a
I want to
version.
make that I want to make that more intuitive because it's kind of weird. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like the like I would just try to steal from Google Docs as much as possible because it's actually pretty reasonable UX, for doing this.
Yeah.
Um, I would like to be able to highlight and not have it automatically publish to my kind one, but maybe I type something and it's natural for me to type annotate
Mm.
with my own thoughts, right? Like just like I'm writing in the edge of a book. I can
Yeah,
write those
totally.
things, and then when I click, save or post or I highlight, then maybe it's even optional. Maybe there's a checkbox I can either post to my Nostr feed or not. I don't know how you want to call it, but
Yeah.
something where it's like a check mark that I can optionally do. So it doesn't. If I want to highlight 15 things, it's not going to keep spamming my followers. But if I have something that
That's
I
what I
do,
wanted to avoid because that to me felt very very spammy.
right.
Can
We could every week we could there's new products that you're building we could be talking about, and there's so much good philosophy behind it, and then sort of the product experiences. So this doesn't have to be the one and done, but maybe
Perfect.
we
Love it.
can wrap with this. We'll just get it out quick and
Perfect. Absolutely
awesome.
love
This is
it.
fun. Yeah, thanks for making the time.
Yeah, no, thank you, DK. You gave me a lot to think, so that's
Awesome.
perfect.